with you. Oh, tell me, darling, can I have a talk with you? Tell me, pretty darling, oh, I love this fool.
It's blues time, ladies and gentlemen, right here on our stage. Before rock, before jazz, before R&B, there was blues. It's been around a lot longer than any of those other styles, but blues sounds just as fresh today as it did when it was being born. Hello, my name is Keith Wyatt, and I'd like to welcome you to the Ultimate Beginner Series for Blues Guitar, Step 1. Whether you're a beginning player looking for new styles to explore, or a player who just wants to get back to the roots, we're going to spend the next half hour or so with the blues. I want to remind you at this time that if the basic guitar playing skills I refer to in this video are completely new to you, you might want to check out the Ultimate Beginner Series Guitar Basics Steps 1 and 2, where I get you started with the chords and scales we'll be using here. The only other thing you'll need is a guitar that's in tune with mine, so let's start out by tuning your high E string to my high E string. Okay, I'm going to go through the strings one at a time, and you tune up as we go. All right, here's high E. Here's B. And G. Now we'll go to D. A. And the low E. Now if you need to, you can stop the tape and tune up before we get going, because you're going to need to be in tune, all right? And when you're ready, turn the machine back on. Let's get down to it. To help you get the most out of this video, we're going to use something called tablature. At the bottom of the screen, you're going to see 6 lines, and they represent the 6 strings of your guitar. The top line is like the top string of your guitar. The bottom line is like the bottom string. It's almost like you're holding your guitar and looking at it like this. And on the 6 strings, you're going to see numbers. The numbers represent frets, and that'll go for chords if I play a chord. The numbers tell you that 7th fret, 6th fret, 5th fret, and so on. And if I play a scale, same thing. So between watching my fingers and seeing the numbers, you got it made. There are 3 basic elements to any style of music, and that includes blues. The 3 elements are harmony, melody, and rhythm. The place we're going to start playing blues is with the rhythm, because that's the driving force behind the style, and as you'll find out, you can play some pretty good stuff with even 1 note or 1 chord if the rhythm is right. In blues, the basic rhythm is called the 8th note triplet shuffle. Now just to back up a little bit, the basic beat in most styles of music is called the quarter note, and it has that name because there are 4 of them in a complete measure. I'm going to put my guitar down here for a second so we can talk about this stuff. Now, quarter notes, you just snap your finger, clap your hand, tap your foot, and that's where you get the feel of the beat. It's a very natural thing, right? Now you take 4 of them in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3. There's your measure. Now if you play 2 notes for each one of these quarter notes, they're called 8th notes. All right, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Those are 8th notes. If you play 3 notes in one beat, we call it a triplet or an 8th note triplet. Very even. Now a triplet shuffle is when you play only the first and last notes of the triplet, and it feels kind of relaxed and lopsided, like you're shuffling down the street. It sounds like this. Here's the triplet again. And playing only the first and last. All right, get that feeling? Already you can start to move to it, right? Now compare that to the straight 8th note. Here's the straight 8th note and the shuffle. It's so relaxed, all right? Now once you start to feel it, you can move with it, you can kind of sing it. Da, 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 da. You get that groove going, pick up your guitar and play the, oh yeah. All right? It doesn't take much, does it, right? It sort of feels kind of that blues mood already, you know. Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, they kind of built careers around not much more than this right here, you know. Put a little attitude on top, right? Now I'm just playing that one string there. I'm using the pick, of course, playing all down strokes. Now even something as simple as this, there's a little bit of technique to it. And what it is, every time there's a downbeat, I'm accenting with the pick. Listen. You hear that? Now I'm also muting with the heel of my right hand. I'm deadening the string so it sounds nice and percussive. Right? Now the next thing I'm going to do is add some harmony. And to make harmony, all you need to do is put another note together with that one. And there's your chord. It's a simple chord, but that's a chord nonetheless. One finger, I'm playing B on the 5th string. So I have E and B together. Some people call that a power chord. In blues, I don't know what you call it. Let's just call it an E chord. Right? Now your finger can also hang over on the E on the 4th string. Now you have a 3-note chord. Get that same groove going. Remember your accent. Now we're going to add a note to that to make a pattern. Now the note I'm adding is C sharp. It's at the 4th fret on the 5th string. In relation to the E chord itself, the root E, it's the 6th note. The B is the 5th, the C sharp is the 6th. So I'm going from the 5th to the 6th. Right? And there's my pattern. Still keep accenting in the same way. Now to make it hip, I can use a little upstroke now and again so I can get the high E and the B there together. Now I got a complete pattern. You can take the exact same shape, move it over to A. Now I've got the open A string, got my finger on the E and the A together, it's a bar, and I add at the 4th fret on the 4th string the F sharp. There's my upstroke. Go back to E. Oh yeah. Now there's one more chord you can play in the open position, that's D. The D is a little different. The reason is because of the tuning of the 3rd and 2nd strings. You have to use a slightly different shape. So what I'm going to do here is play the 2 notes together, open D, the A, add the B, and then instead of using a bar with my index finger, I use my 2nd finger here. All right, so. Now E. It's blues time. It's that simple, right? So we got 3 chords, we got a little rhythm here. It's happening. Now, you want to play in other keys or you want to be able to move around the neck a little bit, you have to use bar chords. So we'll take those same 3 chords, A, D, and E, and move them up to 5th position. This is where most people wind up playing this most of the time anyway. Same basic principle. You get the root of the chord, the 5th of the chord, and with the 3rd finger I can bar across 2 strings. Now I have to reach up with my 4th finger. It's a little bit more of a stretch. Now if I want to play D, shift over to the 5th string. Right? You have to be careful with the right hand now because the tendency is going to be to want to hit that low string. You don't want to do that. So you deaden the low string with the tip of your finger. My right hand is still kind of tight here. Back to A. Now E is up at the 7th position. There's the E chord. There's the added note. now that we got 3 chords in a pocket, we need somewhere to use it. And what we're going to do is play what we've just learned over the 12-bar progression. This is the most common progression by far in blues. And the 3 chords that we're playing, the A chord, D, and the E, all happen to belong together in one key, and the key, of course, is the key of A. In the key of A, the A chord, logically enough, is called the 1 chord. It's the tonic chord, based on the first note of the scale. Now, when you go up to the 4th note of the scale, that's D. So we call that the 4 chord. And then, of course, E is right next door. That's the 5 chord. And 1, 4, 5, arranged in the 12-bar progression, is the foundation of the style that we play today that we call blues. Now, here's the way it works. You're going to play 4 bars on the 1 chord. We'll use our little rhythm pattern here to get started. All right. There's bar 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to shift over to the 4 chord. 2 bars on the 4 chord. Here's the 2nd bar. Back to 1. Stay in time. Now we go to 5, and then back to 4, and then around to 1, and then up to 5. And then the whole thing starts all over again. It's an endlessly recycling progression. There are some variations that you run into, and we'll get into some of those later on in this video and in step 2. The first thing I want to show you is the way that people usually handle the 5 chord at the end. Instead of playing a full bar of 5, there's a little variation people use. 5 chord, 4 chord, here's the 1. Right. That's the sound that you hear most often on almost every blues record. Now what I did there is I actually hang on to the 1 chord for 1 extra beat. 5, 4, and instead of a bar of 1 and a bar of 5, 1, 2, and. Right? So what I did is I hung onto the 1 chord and then slid down into the 5 chord, and this requires a new chord. Now in the beginner series, step 2, I showed you dominant chords, dominant 7th chords. Here's a 9th chord. And the reason it's called a 9th chord is it contains an extra note, which is called the 9th. And I don't want to get too far into theory land right now, so I'm just going to show you the chord and leave it at that. This is an E dominant 9th chord, and you're going to see this diagram on your screen as we go here. 2nd finger on the E, 1st finger on the 4th string at the 6th fret, and then it's very simple. Your 3rd finger will bar all the top 3 strings. Got to get a lot of pressure down on the 3rd finger there, almost bend it backwards a bit to make it really work. And you want to get the highest note in there as well. So we slide down from above, F9 to E9. So once again, 5 chord, 4 chord, and here we go. 1, 2, and. Then we'll start the top of the progression again. So that's the standard blues turnaround. Now it's called a turnaround because you're getting ready to turn around and go back to the start of the tune again, right? So it makes sense. Now we've got a groove, we've got a little chord pattern here, we've got a turnaround, we've got a 12-bar progression. Let's talk about some other ways to play rhythm. The one that I just showed you is probably the fundamental rhythm groove that guitar players have played for as long as the style's been around. But when you have more than one guitar, 2 guitars playing together, usually you'll have one guitar playing that, and then the second guitar has to do something different. Or if you're playing on a tune, you don't want to do the same thing all the time. You need some variations. So I'll show you a couple of real common variations. Now one is to take the chord that I showed you in step 2 there, the dominant chord, big fat bar chord all across the 6 strings, and you play a little pattern. Instead of playing a constant beat, what you do is play some accents. It goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. For the 4 chord, we're using a D9. Same as the E, but based on D. And then E, D, and Here's the turnaround. Right? Very simple little pattern. One thing you want to notice is I keep my right hand going the whole time. That's my groove. That's my metronome right there. I'm playing the shuffle against the strings. And then I control the groove with my left hand. Where I press the fingers down is where the chord starts. And when I lift the fingers up, that's when the chord stops. That's where you get your pattern. All right? Now I'm going to show you a couple more, and then we're going to go and try this stuff out with the band. So hang on for a second here. Here's another one. Right, now that's authentic blues rhythm phrasing right there. This is based on a lot of different players that you hear throughout the history of blues. Now what I'm actually doing is starting with what looks like an A minor triad and then hammering on with my second finger. See that move there? Right? Hold the third finger down as you do that. So you're hearing the full chord with the note hammered on. Right? Now what I do is pick the downstroke on the A, then a downstroke on the hammer-on, another downstroke on A, fold my third finger over, and then come back to the hammer-on. Now for D, instead of staying in this position, I'm going to move up to where the D chord is located, based on the same shape. And then back to A. And then up to the E chord, D, and then A. And the turnaround, right? Now you can do little variations on that kind of a thing as well. Here's another variation I kind of like. Instead of hammering on, you can go like, you can slide into the shape. And in this case, you take your first finger, second finger, slide them up a fret. Third finger. One more variation here. This is the stuff. I'm giving you the real thing right here. Check it out, right? Right? Now that's a little tricky move there. You start out the same as we did already. And then you have to shift your entire hand up to the 7th position. First finger, third finger, second finger, right? That's still an A7 chord, but it's a little bit different. And then with the third finger again, barring, and then back to that hammer-on. That move is going to take a little while to get down. You have to work on the shifts so that you're making your connection very smooth. Up to D. E. Now we're only going to do half. That's the hip way, right? You split that phrase in half and play half on the E chord, and then you play the second half of the phrase on the D chord, and back to A. And the turnaround, all right? So now in the space of a couple of minutes, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ways to play rhythm on a medium shuffle. It's happening. There's only one thing left to do. Let's go play with the band. Right now we're going to go join Roscoe Beck and John Bishop playing the same patterns that I just showed you. And what you're going to see on the screen is me playing the basic shuffle pattern, first thing I showed you, and then through the magic of video technology, I'm going to play along with myself and play each one of the variations that I just explained to you. And you have a choice. You can play along with me, you can play the basic part, you can try one of the other parts while I'm playing a separate part. It's up to you, really. Just have some fun with it, okay? And this will give you a chance to feel what it's like to play with a great rhythm section. All right, check it out. Well, now it's definitely blues time. Since we already have a groove and we got some chords, we're ready to talk about the third part of music, which is melody, in this case soloing, blues soloing. Look around here at these guys, looks like every one of them is in the midst of getting down, taking care of business, probably using the scale I'm about to show you right here. Now, in the basic step 2, I showed you the pentatonic scale, and that's the basic sound that we're still going to use. We're going to start to add things to it and make it sound more specifically bluesy, but that's kind of the starting point. So once again, just to review quickly, key of A, the guitar player's key, starting in 5th position on the top string. With my first finger, I play the A, 4th finger, just follow along with me, watch that tab too. 3rd finger, 1st finger, right on down through the scale. Very easy to play. Your first finger is always there as a reference, right? You keep coming back to that first finger. That's what makes this pattern so special for guitar players. Now, to make it a little bit bluesier, we're going to add a note to it, starting again at the top. Here's the note. With your 4th finger. Now that's called the flat 5. Now that note, you just play it one time, it sounds bluesy. What can you say? They call that a blue note. And that's kind of one of the things that makes blues sound the way it does. You hear little phrases. And of course you can add it to the lower octave as well. There's the 5th, flat 5, 4th. So there's our basic blues scale pattern. Now if you want to, you can stop the tape and just kind of run your fingers around that pattern a little bit. Get your fingers used to the shape and get used to adding in that note, because we're going to be using that a bit as we go along. I'm going to show you 2 little extensions onto that basic pattern that give you a little bit more room to move and allow you to cover most of the sounds that you hear, like the greats using. They work out of this pattern, almost all of them. First of all, instead of stopping on the low A there, we're going to go down 2 frets to G. And you get this little, what they call a box shape down here. 1st finger, 3rd finger. There's the G, the A. Then we get the C instead of up here. We get it here, and then the D there. So as you come down the scale, and then you can add that flat 5 again. So it kind of gives you a way to play in the lower octave and get down to it in that position. Moving back up, all you have to do is shift up and you're back in position. And now we're going to add something onto the top. Moving up to the next spot, we're at the 10th fret now, and come back down again. And you get a little position right here, which is one of the most common and most useful positions. You can bend from it. Now there's that flat 5 again. Right? And now, as you just saw, we have 3 octaves in which we can play almost any blues lick you want to hear. One thing guitar players love to do is learn new patterns and work things out all over the neck. And that's cool, but in blues you don't really need to do that as much as you might want to do it in other styles, because if you can find a good melody, usually it sticks within about 1 octave. And then all you can have to do is move it down 2 frets, move it up 2 frets, and you got it. So these are our 3 basic positions that we're going to be using. And from this point on, once you got the basic technique, it's all phrasing. So let's take a few minutes and talk about that. Now the essence of blues soloing is phrasing. It's taking those few notes that we just looked at and making them sound like music. You know, a comparison that I use a lot is between playing blues and playing a game like chess, for instance. Chess is pretty simple when you think about it. There's only a couple of moves. You can memorize it in about 15 minutes. But then you can spend the rest of your life trying to figure out what to do with it, you know? It's kind of the same way with blues. You got a 5-note scale, add in that flat 5, right? And then you spend next 20, 30, 40 years trying to figure out how to make it work, you know? And that's phrasing. So phrasing, when guitar players talk about phrasing, the most common term that people use is licks. And that's a good thing, and it's also kind of a dangerous thing. We're going to talk about licks in a second. The whole point of phrasing is to make you sound more like a singer. Blues kind of was invented by singers, people singing about their lives, you know, things that were going on, important things. And when you sing something, you're going to tend to focus more on the important notes. You're not going to sing scales. You're going to sing melodies. So the whole goal of this section right here is to talk about how to get your guitar playing to sound more like you're singing. And one of the keys is to learn how to breathe, and not only what to play, but what not to play, all right? Now, I mentioned licks. What is a lick? A lick is a short, rhythmic, repeatable, melodic phrase. It has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. Now, basically, it's a couple of well-played notes with a nice rhythm. I'm going to play a lick for you right here, okay? Using the blues scale. Right. Now that has a beginning, has a little pause in the middle, and then it has an ending. And it fits into the rhythm. You can kind of feel that beat. Play with me, would you? That's pretty easy to play, and nothing tricky in the technique at all, really. But it sounds nice. Now, what is it that makes it work? Well, there's a couple of things going on there. One is the rhythm. Da, 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 da. It has a nice natural feel to it. With that pause in the middle, it kind of makes it feel like you're saying something, taking a breath, and then completing the idea. That's the essence of phrasing. Also, it rhythmically fits into the groove in a nice way, right? Now, there are no real hard and fast rules about what beat to start on, what note to start on. The only way to really learn phrasing is to listen to people that know how to phrase and copy. And over time, your own style will start to come out of that, all right? But I'm going to show you some of the basic techniques that people use. First of all, back in the basic step 2, I talked about hammer-ons. Now, this is something all guitar players use. It's a way of blending the notes together a little bit. So for instance, I'm picking every note here. And I'm using all downstrokes. In blues, as a rule, you don't have to worry too much about tricky right-hand technique. Downstrokes work most of the time. One thing I'm going to do to kind of change it a bit is, instead of picking all those notes, I'm going to pick this note, pull off, hammer on. You hear the difference? Kind of changes the way the notes flow together. Smooths it out a little bit. Now check this out. Instead of picking the flat 5, I'm going to hammer on from the 4th. I get. Starts to get a little bit more bluesy when you just add that one little subtlety in there. Now, what about something like this? Now there, instead of hammering on, what I did was I slid from one note to the other. Right? And when you slide, it's more like your voice. Ah, right? You don't actually hit the notes as separate sounds. You kind of blend them together. And then, instead of hammering on, slide. That's a real common phrase in blues, in jazz. Okay. Now, another way to blend the notes together is to bend. Now Now some of the common bends that you hear in the blues scale are bending from the 7th up to the octave. It's probably the most common bend of all, bending from the 4th up to the 5th, or bending just a half step. Now a bend that you may not notice that I'm using a lot is this one right here. Now that is really a blues bend right there. What I'm playing is the 3rd of the scale, the root, the 3rd, right? But instead of playing that note right there, I'm playing that note. Now it's not quite there, it's not there, it's halfway in between. That is the blues, that's a blue note. Practically every player you ever hear play the blues is going to use that particular note in every octave. Right? You have to learn your notes in relation to the chords so you can think, where's the 3rd? When you hear that note, give it that little twist, right? Now, we got 3 basic techniques there: hammering on, pulling off, sliding, bending. They all add up to make the phrasing sound more vocal. But rather than me show you a bunch of licks and have you memorize them, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do it the authentic way. Blues players throughout history have always learned from each other by listening. You copy, you hear some record, you see somebody play, you sit down, you work on it, you know. Try to remember what you heard. Well, you're going to see it and hear it, and I'm going to play with you. We're going to play with the band again on one chord. We don't need even a 4-chord and a 5-chord, just a single A chord, all right? And the way we're going to do it is this: call and response. I'm going to play a lick, and you're going to hear that same lick and play it back at me. And you can roll the tape back and listen to it a few times again. I'm going to use the techniques that we've been talking about here. I'll use the 3 octaves, and moving down again. And I'll show you some ideas that fit in those areas using those different sounds. And what we're building up to here is a style. All right, so let's go join the fellas and get down to it. Watch it now. Take it. Check this out. You got it. Same thing. Take it down. That sounds pretty good. Let's do it up here. Oh, baby. How about this one? That's right. Here's a good one right here. Let's go up in this spot for a second. Think you can do that? Try this one. One more. Here we go. Tricky one. Here we go. Back to 5th. Work this spot for a second. Here's a classic. high again. Let's get mellow now. It's got a trick note in it. Gotta hold that note down while you play it. Watch it. Well, I hope by now you got a couple of licks that you like, that you can use. And the great thing about learning licks like that are short and complete is that you can take them and plug them in just about anywhere. And what we're going to do right now is get you ready to play over that 12-bar progression. This is what it's all about, really. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you can use those licks. Now, we got the 12-bar progression we know about. We go to the 4 chord and the 5 chord. 3 different chords, but that same scale works over all 3 chords. That's the magic of the blues scale. Now, you can actually play an entire 12-bar solo using only one lick. For instance, let's say we're starting our tune off. Now, help me out by playing some rhythm here. But play the rhythm for me so you can hear how these things go. Okay, key of A. Here we go. 1, 2, 1. Here's the lick. Here comes the 4 chord. Now here comes 5. Right? That was the same lick each time, and it works. It feels good. You know, it starts and ends in a nice place. What else do you need? Well, if you do that all the time, of course, it starts to get a little predictable. So here's another way you can do it. Use that same lick twice. Right, 4 chord. Now we're going to play a different lick. That's taking the idea of call and response, which we used over a single chord, and adding it to the 12-bar concept. So you have the call again, you have the response. Now, does that remind you of something? It should. That's how singers in blues phrase their vocals. They sing the same line twice, and then they sing an answering line. That's the traditional way the 12-bar vocal phrases are put together. So once again, thinking like a singer. Now, one thing that we haven't talked about, very important, at the end of the progression, hit that 5 chord, that's called the turnaround. What do you play over the turnaround? Well, I'm going to show you something right here. It's the simplest possible thing on earth. When the chord goes to 5, you go to 5 with your melody. So once again, let's take it from the end of the progression, 5 chord, 4 chord, and the 1. Now you play that, and I'm going to show you a lick here. Starting on 5, 2, 3, 4. Right? Now when you went, I went, what did I do? I just played the root of the 5 chord. That's the turnaround. That locks me into the sound of the band, and it makes the solo sound complete. Very important. Don't forget it. Let's talk for a second about equipment, because I think it's important. If you're a beginning guitar player, sometimes you can get a little intimidated by the stuff, you know. Seems like you have to spend a fortune to get a sound. Well, I'm going to tell you one thing, and this is true, okay? So listen to this. You know where your sound comes from? Right here. These 2 hands. This is your sound, okay? From here, 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 all right? Everything else is just how you get it out, right? Now, you got to have something that's going to work for you and not going to stand in your way. There are any number of different guitar makes, amp makes, effects. They're all going to work equally well if the sound is coming from the right place. All right, now I happen to use a popular guitar here. You recognize this one, Fender Strat. I bought this brand new. I'm not going to tell you what year either. But I like this guitar. It's got a nice, sweet, even sort of a sound that's good for a lot of different styles of music and not just blues. Basic difference in guitars is between single coil pickups and double coil pickups or humbuckers. Double coil pickups tend to be fatter. They get a little bit more distortion at a lower volume. Depending on your style, that might be the best sound for you, or you might want a sweeter single coil sound. This is better for rhythm parts and things like that. When it comes to strings, there's kind of a controversy there. Of course, easier to bend light strings, but light strings you lose a lot of tone. And tone is so important in blues that I would ask you to go to at least a 10 on top and down to a 46 or a 52 even on the bottom. Some people use light top, heavy bottom. I use an even set of regular strings but with a 10 on top. Some players will go even higher, but often keep in mind when a player uses a 13 or something on top, I bet most of the time they're tuned down to E flat or even to D, so that makes the action a little bit easier to play. When it comes to amplifiers, I would say the rule of thumb still to this day is that most of the time tube amps are preferable. They just have a warmer sound. So if you want to get that authentic tone, you're probably going to want to wind up with something that has tubes in it. Very important. All right, now it's time to get together with the band again and use all the techniques and the phrasing ideas we've been talking about together with the fellas. And you're going to be playing some 12-bar solos. Now remember, when you get to that 5 chord, the turnaround, just hit the root of the chord. It's E, right? You can play it down here, you can play it up here. And remember what else I told you when you were playing rhythm, at the end of the tune, where do you go? You don't go to 5, you go to 1, all right? So when you play your last lick, end your last lick on the root, A, and that'll make it sound finished, complete, done. Now when you're playing blues solos, there's something you have to keep in mind. If you're going to play 2 or 3 choruses in a row, it's like you're telling a little story. And just like a lick has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, your entire solo wants to have that same feeling. That's what makes it really work. So don't go too high, too fast. You build your momentum up gradually. You might start out low and leave lots of space, and then you start to fill in the space a little bit more, play a little bit faster, maybe play some more notes, start to go up higher and register. And also don't forget that right hand. The right hand really contains the key to dynamics. That's loud and soft. And if you want to be intense, you don't have to play fast, you just play harder. So if you want to really go high, of course everything we're learning right here, go up 12 frets, same exact shape. It's a little harder to play up there because you have to kind of reacquaint your hand with the position, but that's all you really need, and there's some fabulous players, Albert Collins among others, that are basically 2-position players. They play here, they play here, and then they take it up an octave, and that's it, right? And they built careers on that. So don't think you got to know a bunch of patterns before you can play, all right? So we're going to go join the band right now, and tell you what, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to play a solo through with the band one time myself and use the same kinds of ideas that we've been talking about. Then we're going to start them up again, and it's going to be your turn. You ready? Let's do it. All right, I gave it my best shot. Now it's your turn. Why don't you step on up there with the band and give it a couple of choruses, all right? Remember what I told you. Don't forget about that one chord at the end and dig in. There's still plenty more to do. So when you come back for step 2, we're going to get much deeper into all of those subjects. I'm going to show you some different rhythm parts, some new chords. We're going to slow the tempo down a little bit. That's the real deep down blues. So until then, keep on playing.
Oh, tell me, darling, can I have a talk with you? Oh, tell me, darling, can I have a talk with you? Tell me, pretty darling, for our love is through. Oh,
Hi, my name is Keith Wyatt, and I'd like to welcome you to the Ultimate Beginner Series for Blues Guitar, Step 2. Now, if you saw Step 1, we covered all the fundamentals of blues. We talked about the 12-bar blues progression, about the medium shuffle, and about several different ways to play rhythm on that pattern. We talked about the basics of phrasing, starting with the scale and then adding some string bending, sliding, hammer-ons, things like that. In Step 2, we're going to take all of that stuff one step further. We're going to slow the tempo down a bit so we can really concentrate on how the notes sound, each note individually. And we're going to talk about some extremely important techniques like vibrato, and we'll get further into string bending at the same time. We'll also talk about a couple of different scale patterns that will help add to the sounds that you can play. Now, the only thing you need is your guitar and to be in tune with mine. So let's take a second here and tune up before we get started. All right, I'm going to play each string one at a time, and you tune up to me. Here we go, starting with the high E string. Here we go. Now B. The G. D. A. And low E. And when you get done, play a chord. See if it sounds all right. If you're not in tune yet, go ahead and stop the tape, get tuned up, and then you'll be ready to go. All right? I'll see you in a second. In step one, we talked about the medium shuffle, and I talked about the 12-bar chord progression. There's a couple things I want to add to that. We're still going to talk about a shuffle, but we're going to slow the rhythm down a little bit. And when you slow it down, you can start to feel each part of the triplet. At a medium tempo, of course, you got the dot, 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 dot feeling going, right, with the first and last part of the triplet. At a slower tempo, start to feel more like the full triplet. Dot, 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 dot. It's still a shuffle, but it's a slow shuffle, and this is the essence of slow blues. Also, we're going to change key. Everything we did in step one was based around the key of A. Let's go to the key of G, just for a change. And we might even change it up again later on. You don't want to be stuck to some fret, do you, huh? So, key of G. Now, what do? Well, here's A on the 6th string. Move it down. There's G. Want to play a blues in G? You got it. Now, with the 12-bar progression, we played a very standard, basic version. 4 bars on the 1 chord, 2 bars on the 4 chord, and so on. There's a variation I'm going to show you right now, which happens probably 50% of the time, and that's this right here. I'm going to show you what it is. You'll hear it, and then I'll explain it for you. It goes like this. There's G. Now what happened? I counted the thing off, and instead of staying 4 bars on the 1 chord, I went directly to the 4 chord in the 2nd bar. That's called a quick change. That's what everybody calls it, so you want to know that name. Quick change means 4 chord in the 2nd bar. Then you go right back to the 1 chord for 2 more bars, so it's still a total of 4. 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 1 chord. Then you change to the 4 chord as you did previously, 2 bars on the 4 chord, then back to 1 for 2 bars. Then you go 5, 4, 1, turnaround. That's the only thing that really changed, all right? Now, in addition to that, I'm going to show you a new rhythm pattern. This has been around for quite a while. It's actually invented probably by T-Bone Walker over 60 years ago. It goes like this. Now right now it feels kind of weird because you don't know where the beat is, but I'm going to show you the shape and then show you how to plug it in. This is based around this chord right here. First of all, let's form a G major triad. That's a familiar shape. And we're going to take the top 4 strings, so you refinger it, 3rd finger, 2nd finger, 1st finger, bar. And then we're going to add a note to it. Your 4th finger isn't doing anything right now. So take that 4th finger, stick it on the 2nd string at the 5th fret. Now you've got the same shape with that note added. That's called a 6th chord, a 6th chord. Now you take that chord and you move it down 2 frets. Now you're thinking that must be F6, right? Wrong. This is the trick. This is a guitar trick right here. Magic of the way the guitar is laid out. It's the same shape, moved down 2 frets, but it's still a G chord. So that's actually called a G9 or a G dominant 9 chord. G6, G9. This is a very important chord, and we're going to come back to this one again too. But the pattern involves sliding from there to there. Now how do you add that to the 12-bar progression? Well, what you do is you play that little slide starting on the 2nd beat of the measure. So it goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4. Right, you got it? Play with me. Let's try C. Now you can move up. There's C. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and back to G. 4, 1, 2, and now up to D. Here's the D root. D6, the root's on top. Sliding down to D9. So 3, 4, 1, 2, and back to C again, and back to G. Remember the turnaround? That's from step 1. We go from the chord half step above the 5 chord down to the 5 chord, playing a 9th chord. You recall that shape. All right, so there's your slow blues rhythm part. Now the way I showed you is to take the same shape and move it around. I'll show you one more little trick here. It makes it a little easier even. There's your slide, 4 chord. There's your C chord up here. The exact same notes, but played with one finger. So check it out. 3, 4, G, 2, and 3. Here comes C. Just use your index finger. Back to G again. Now you can stay in position. Very easy. Now we go back to C. I'm putting in the bass note there just so you know where you are. I hope you're playing with me now. Come on. Here's D. Now we start here. Right? Same shape as the C. And back to G again. And the turnaround. Got it? Work on that one for a second. Now I'm going to show you another way to play rhythm using the same kind of chord that I just showed you. That's the 6th chord. Now we've learned it as a sliding chord, but here's how you can use it just using this shape all by itself and using the top note as well. Gives you a little bit of extra fullness. Now this style of playing is something that I call horn section rhythm. The reason being the types of phrases that we're going to play kind of remind me of what you see. If you see a blues band and it got the 4 saxophones up there wearing the matching salmon velour suits, right? And they're all doing their steps. Bop, 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 da, ba, right? You can kind of get that in your mind because that's what we're going after right here. So this is the kind of chord you're going to hear. 3, 4. Right? That's the idea. That's exactly the sound we're going for. So you take that shape and you can slide it by half step and right back into position again. Then when you go to the 4 chord, staying in the same position, you can use C9 and then the D9. It's very easy. We'll go back to our slower tempo and I'll play it through as a demo one time. Once you back me up, I'll tell you what, this would be a good combination right here. Play that real slow and easy groove. Don't forget your quick change, right? Play that behind me and I'll show you how this horn section thing works. Here we go. 1, 2, top. And we're back to 4 now. Now the 5. It's really easy and it's a nice effective way of building the groove up a little bit. If you combine that with this one, you've got 2 different ways to play rhythm on a slow blues in addition to all the other styles that I showed you in the previous video. Now you've got a lot of possibilities. That's what you need as a rhythm player, both to make the sound interesting for the listener and to keep yourself interested as well. If you're playing the same part all the time, it gets a little bit boring. Now that we have a couple of different rhythm patterns, let's put it all back together in a 12-bar progression again. I'm going to show you 2 more variations. First, I'm going to show you a new introduction, and then I'm going to show you a new chord to use at the end. All right, starting with the introduction. There are 2 ways that bands generally start blues songs most of the time, and one of them is just to start from the 1, as they say. In other words, count the song off and start right on the 1 chord and go through the progression, either with the quick change or without. That's the kind of thing you talk over beforehand. The second way that's extremely popular is what they call take it from the 5. And what this means simply is you start with the 5 chord and play the last 4 bars of the 12-bar progression, which we've been doing as we've been working on some of these little patterns here. So we get 5, 4, and then you'll play the usual turnaround. Then you start the next chorus from the top, right? And keep going from there. It's a nice introduction. It gives you a little variety in your arrangements, and it kind of sets the song up. So it's a good one to know. That's called From the 5. So we're going to play an arrangement in just a moment here that uses that particular introduction. The second thing is the last chord. Now, as I mentioned in step 1, when you get to the end of a blues, it's very important that you end on the 1 chord. The timing is all the same as it is for the rest of the choruses. You go 5, 4, now we're coming up to the end. This is the last chorus, the song's over. You don't go to 5, you go back to 1. That's extremely important. If you go to 5, it sounds like you're going to keep going. This sounds like you're ending. Now the chord I'm using here is the new thing. This is also a 9th chord. And all I've done is take the sliding chord that we learned earlier and add one more note to it. And the note is this right here. And this is called G dominant 9th. Now the funny thing about this chord is that you look throughout the notes here, there's no G in that chord. The bass note, the root, is over here. And you're not playing it. The bass player is playing it, right? So when you hear the bass player play the G and play this chord against it, you get this overall effect. I'm using my thumb here. So there's your G dominant 9th chord. If you want to use the same chord for C, you can go up the neck and find it in the 8th position. There's your root. You're not playing it, but there it is. You can see it. There's D. All right. So now we have 2 ways to play a 9th chord. G9 and C9, 2 different voicings. We have G6. We have another G9 with that high note on top. And we have all the other little variations that we worked on in the first video. Lots of possibilities. All right, now let's take some of the things we've been working on and put them together in probably the world's shortest blues song. We're going to play a complete arrangement, but it's going to begin and end in 1 chorus. All right, I'm going to explain it to you exactly the way that we talk it over as a band. Now this is a 12-bar slow blues in the key of G, quick change. The intro is from the 5, and when we get to the end, I'm going to throw one more thing on you right here as a rhythm player. What we're going to do is come up to the end, and you're playing your whatever part you're playing. Here's the 5 chord, the 4 chord. When you get to 1, you're going to stop along with the band, 4, 1, then end, and use that 9th chord that I showed you at the end there. That's the hip chord right there. All right, now during that break, I'm going to play a little lick. As a matter of fact, I'm going to jam over the whole thing. You're going to back me up. It better be good too, huh? So you can use anything you want. You're going to hear some rhythm guitar on the track, and you can play around that. You can play with that, right? It's just using all the same ideas we've covered and putting them together in different ways so you get a taste of it. All right, you ready? Let's do it. Well, now that we've spent some time with rhythm and with groove at that slower tempo, let's turn our attention again to melody, to soloing. And slower tempo is a good place to really get into phrasing because you've got more time to think about the notes. It really brings out the quality of each note. And that's what phrasing is all about, is make each note sound finished before you go on to the next note. Very important point. Now, as part of our phrasing discussion here, we're going to open up the neck a little bit. And let me review for just a second what was covered in step one. We talked about the blues scale, and since we've been in the key of G so far, we'll stay here for the moment. Blues scale in the key of G would be based around the 3rd fret. And remember, we added some low notes and some high notes. Right? So now in the key of G, we can cover the 3rd fret region down to the 1st fret and up to about the 8th fret. Now, one alternative, if you want to go higher, is like many great blues players do, you just skip immediately up to the octave, which is all the way up here at the 15th fret. And you can obviously find all the same notes up there that you found down at the 3rd fret. There's another pattern that players use to help fill in the gap between what you've got in this area of the neck and what's all the way up high. And that's the one I'm about to show you. This is based around the 10th position. We're in the key of G, remember. And if our first pattern was built essentially around this big G major bar chord, then the next pattern I'm going to show you is built around this G major bar chord. And this is one that everybody knows. It's convenient to think of chords and scales as being related. If you let them get too far apart from one another, it makes your soloing and your rhythm playing kind of separate. And that's not a good idea, especially in blues. So we think of all of our scales as being related to chords. So there's a G chord up in there, and we want to find a G blues scale. Now, there's a G right on the 3rd string, and if I just kind of go by ear, find the same notes that I had down here. There it is, and as a matter of fact, it's precisely the same shape moved up an octave. And now the low G is on the 5th string. And now I can add a little bit down below. Now, here's the trick. When you get to the 2nd string, because of the way that the guitar is tuned, you're going to have to shift up to the next fret. So you use your 2nd finger there. Now, I'm using my 3rd finger. Why? So that I can reach the flat 5 with my 4th finger. Back over to the 5th, and then finally reach up to the 7th. Back down again. Shift. Now that's a scale pattern, and as you've already discovered, solos use ideas built from scale patterns, but the scale itself is not the thing. The scale is just all the notes you can play lined up end to end. It doesn't make a melody. So we're going to want to fish around within that pattern to see if we can find some phrases. Here's the way to do it. Take the phrases you already know from your more familiar position down here and find them in the new spot. All right, there's a familiar phrase in G. I go up here. Now, first thing I have to do is figure out, well, that one starts on the root, right? And it goes up to the next note in the scale. And then I bend it, right? Go up here, find the root. Go up to the next note on the scale. Right? So I'm kind of opening up the new pattern by ear. The shape is different. It's going to make your hands do different things, different combinations of fingers. At first it might seem kind of confusing, but if you relate it back to your original chord shape and use the sound that you're already familiar with, you're going to start to hear and see new phrases in this new position. And what it does is give you a lot more flexibility. You can now link together this spot on the neck to this spot, to this spot, to this spot, and you have very few open spots left. So now you're kind of getting command of the entire neck. All right? So in a little while, we're going to play along with the band again, and I'll give you a chance to use that pattern. But before we do that, I'm going to show you another idea. We're going to get a few things going here, and then you can kind of go back and forth and try them out. So far we've concentrated our melody around the blues scale. That's kind of the basic sound in blues, of course. But you hear a lot of notes like the stuff I was just playing while you were backing me up. It sounds a lot sweeter, and it is, because I'm using different notes. I'm not staying strictly within the blues scale. I'm trying to get a sweeter sound by emphasizing notes that are not in the scale, but they're in the chord. Now check it out, all right? If we take a chord that we already learned here, the G sixth chord. Now look at that chord and compare it to the blues scale in the same position. Now what notes are in the chord that are not in the scale? There's that note right there. There's that note right there. What's that? Major third, major sixth. So we've added two new sounds by playing the notes that are in the chord. If I want to sound like my melody matches the chord, right there I got a classic lick. It's using notes of the chord. Then I can also use the scale. So by emphasizing the notes that belong to the chord, I get a new sound added to my old sound. It's not a new scale. It's just an additional sound within the same bluesy thing that we're already working with, right? So don't freak and think you got to learn a bunch of new patterns. It's not the case. Just adding new sounds to old sounds, right? Now, here's a trick. I'm going to show you the B.B. King secret scale pattern, known only to a few. And here's how you do it right here. We're in the key of G, right? I'm going to find a new spot on the neck, one we haven't used before. Here's G on the first string. We're used to this one. Now, what about if you find G on the second string? Where is it? It's up here at the 8th fret. Now, got a little shape I'm going to use, and it's a shape you already know. If we're in G, our blues scale, and we tack on the extra high notes, remember that? Take that same exact shape, 5 notes, move it up 2 frets. Bingo. Now you got all the sweet notes. Your fingers do basically the same things, but now you're emphasizing naturally the notes that make the melody sound much sweeter. Right? So here's your G chord. Right? Doesn't that sound pretty? Right? Now you can kind of mix it up a little bit. You can start in this position. Now, by ear, I have to choose the notes, right? You can't get away from that. Your fingers are not going to do it. The fingers don't know, right? They're just going to run around, and every note's the same as far as your fingers are concerned. Your ear is what's making the choice. So as I bend a note, I have to listen. Is that the note I want? Yeah, that's it, right? If I bend it a little different, I get a whole different effect. Now this is, as I say, this is the secret B.B. King position, because when you listen to B.B., he's a very sweet player and he uses that effect a lot. So that's a real good spot to work in. So now we have 2 new patterns added to what you've already got. The blues scale, based off the 5th string, 3rd string chord there, and the sweet spot, is what I call it, based off the 2nd string, right? So if you get used to those 2 patterns, now you've really opened up a whole new area of the neck that we haven't used before, and you get a whole different thing going in your melody. Now before we put our new scales, new sounds to work, let's talk for just a moment about some other phrasing ideas. Remember, phrasing is the idea of taking the notes you play and making them sound as much like a singer as possible. Every time I play, here's a technique that I use without even thinking about it anymore, and that's called vibrato. that's a vocal technique. That's one I've heard every singer use that I ever heard. And it's one of the techniques that might take you a while to really master, but it's worth it because it'll make your playing sound polished. It'll give you that final touch that makes the note sound finished. I'll just give you a brief rundown of how it's done, and the rest of it's going to be up to you. It's a string bend. We already know how to bend strings, right? We talked about bending up a whole step. Way back in the basic guitar, step 2, I talked about using a couple of fingers and getting more strength behind the note, using your ear, trying to hear the pitch you're reaching for. Now, vibrato is just like that. I'll show you 2 ways to do it. One is if you're playing a note that's not bent, okay? Here I'm playing, well, I'll pick a note that, on the 2nd string, that's a good one. That's a G. That's at the 8th fret. All right, I'm using my 3rd finger to play the note, 2nd and 1st finger behind it. And what I'm actually doing, I'll slow it way down for you. I'm bending it up and down. Now it's just like a regular string bend. I'm using all 3 fingers and I'm using my wrist to kind of push it up. As it gets faster and faster, at a certain point, it stops sounding like a bend and starts to sound more like a natural kind of vibration. That's vibrato. Okay? Now the trick is it's all in the wrist. The wrist is moving up with the bend and down again. Up and down. The hardest thing is to get control of that motion so it's even. It's the same width and the same speed all the time. Start out slow. You can even use a metronome. Gradually speed up. You'll find a spot there where it just feels like that's the right spot. Every player you see up here on the wall, they all have a different vibrato. In fact, you could probably tell them apart just by their vibrato alone. It's that much of a signature sound. It really makes you different from other players. So it's going to be your own way. It might take a while, but as I say, it's really worth it. Now, if you bend a string, here's the trick. You bend the note to pitch, and then you let it down a little bit, and then back up. So you're bending, releasing, and it gradually gets faster. The hardest thing about that is you're going to tend to get worn out. Your wrist will get tired, your fingers will get tired. If you haven't developed your calluses fully yet, your fingers are going to hurt. But if you can do it unbent, then the bent version is much easier. As I say, I use it everywhere. It's a natural part of blues phrasing. Can't really live without it. Another thing is dynamics. That's loud and soft, and that's a natural thing also that you hear singers do. Most of the time I use the pick, or I'll use my fingers. I don't let go of the pick, though. If I want to use my fingers, I'll just use them with the pick still attached to my normal position. The fingers give you a little softer sound when you pluck a note with it. You can kind of stroke the string as opposed to striking it with the pick. So that's something you can experiment with. Play soft as you can possibly play. And then without touching the volume knob, hit it as hard as you can. That's the range you can get, and it's nothing to do with the electronics. It's all in your fingers. That's where your tone comes from. All right, now we're going to play with the band, do a little call and response like we did on the first video. We're in the key of G. It's only a G chord, one chord, and I'm going to take you through some of the stuff I've been showing you. It's a lot to cover right now. We're going to start out with some familiar stuff, our familiar position, blues scale. Maybe I'll add a sweet note or 2 into that position, move up the neck a bit, and then I'll go into the BB, patented position up there in the 8th fret, and then we'll wind up in the 10th position playing out of the new blues scale pattern. All right? Once again, listen to me. I'm going to play a phrase. I'm going to leave a hole for you to play it back at me. See how close you can get. All right, let's do it. Take it. Da, 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 da. Just stay with me. Let's not forget the low part. Sounds kind of like you're talking down in there. Here's a classic right here. We're going up. Yeah. Stay in that spot for a second. Yeah. Now, third position, some sweet notes. Get that? A little bit more. Now let's try that in BB land here. Yeah, it feels pretty good. Here's a classic BB lick. Stay right in the pocket. Let's go up to 10th position. Try that. Here we go. Same phrases you play down low, just move them up. Oh yeah. I hope you're starting to get the feel a little bit. Basically, it's the same whether you're playing on one chord or playing on a 12-bar progression as we're about to do. The only difference is that when you change to a different chord, some of the notes that sound sweet on the one chord might not sound so good against the 4 chord. And that's because what we're starting to do now is get inside the harmony. We're bringing the harmony and the melody, the scales and the chords closer together. And so you start to hear how they really match up. You can't really tear them apart. When we play a sweet note on the one chord, see, that's really based on that 6th chord right there. When we go to the C chord, for instance, if I play that same lick, that note right there is suddenly going to sound, sounds a little weird. Doesn't quite work. And you might have run into that already in your blues playing, where just a note sounds great over this chord, sounds terrible over that chord. How come? Well, look at the chord and look at the note, and you'll find that usually the note that sounds bad is a half step, 1 fret away from a chord tone, and it gets that dissonant thing happening, which you don't always want. So here's a little trick for you right here, just to get started now. Remember, we're just getting the ball rolling here. If you want to play over chords and you want to match the sound of the notes to the sound of the chords, use phrases that are built right off the shape of the chord. Right? Here's what I mean by that. Your one chord, we already know how to play over this one. Right? Now the notes that I'm playing there come right from the triad and the 7th. Right? So I'm playing really, essentially, almost what amounts to an arpeggio. The notes of the chord played one at a time in different orders. When I go to the 4 chord, C, I've got my C9 chord, or you remember way back from basic step 2, your C7 chord. Now look at the notes in C7. Now that can be a lick, right? Here's your 1 chord lick. Your 4 chord. You check that out? All I'm doing is playing the notes of the chord with a little rhythm attached. The rhythm is so important. You can't separate the rhythm from the melody or the harmony, right? You see, everything kind of fits together, and that's what makes the phrases sound good. So I've got my 1 chord lick going up the 1 chord, my 4 chord lick coming down the 4 chord, right? I can go back up the 1. Here comes the 4 chord again. Same notes, back to 1. Now what about 5? Now what was that? Well, here's a D chord, and I'm playing the notes of the 5 chord. They sound a little funny when you isolate them like that. Now I'm changing my fingering so that I can use a finger that really gives me the most control. Index finger, second finger. That's where I'm trying to control the note, vibrato, etc. And then back to my 4 chord. So there's a complete solo, and it's built mainly from not scales, but from chords. Chords and scales really go together. Now, for instance, the BB did a song that sounded a lot like this. The basic melody of the song was built from the 1 chord, and then, in this case, changing position. So whatever you play here, you can go up, play off the C chord in 8th position, and you'll find the same notes built off the C chord. There's a lot of ways that you can start to mix things up. We've kind of covered the basics, we've covered a lot of ground, but there are many variations that you work out over time. And as you hear different players play and kind of get an idea of how they think, you're going to hear that there are any number of different combinations. All right? Now what we're about to do is play over a 12-bar chord progression. In step 1, we concentrated on the key of A. So far, we've been playing in the key of G. And just to keep you loose, we're going to go to the key of C. Now, the key of C, all the same rules apply. You just have to find your patterns. You've got the same major and minor sounds located in the same relative position. So find your C's. There's your home position right there. You go up. You'll find your sweet spot with the C on the 2nd string. Depending on your guitar, you might be able to play up here in the 15th position. But if not, or even just for a variation, go down to the 3rd position, an octave low. And you'll be able to cover some ground down there as well. All right? So we're going to play over a 12-bar progression. I'm going to give it a shot. You're going to back me up, and then you're going to have your turn. All right? Let's do it. So I hope you had a good time with this video, and I hope you have a great time playing, and I hope to have a chance to see you again soon. All right, see you later.